When everything in your painting has the same level of emphasis, we are really emphasizing nothing. You've probably heard people talk about the foreground, the middle ground, and the background of your painting. Well, today I'm going to talk about what role each one of those plays. Knowing what I'm going to tell you today made a big difference in my paintings. It really helped me bring some organization and some clarity to my paintings. So today I'm going to show you how I paint this scene and the choices that I make along the way, and how I treat the foreground, the middle ground, and the background. And I was attracted to the scene for two reasons. I really liked the light that was hitting this house, and I really liked this tree. In composition and in painting, we talk about the foreground, the middle ground, and the background of your scene. Now, the foreground of your scene should lead you and invite you into the painting. We don't want the very front of our painting to be absolutely cluttered with information. What we don't want it to do is to steal the show. And then when we get into the middle ground of the scene, that is where we have the most of everything. That is where we want the most contrast, the most saturation, and the most attention in the middle of your painting. And the background, kind of like the foreground, needs to not steal the show. So a lot of times in the background, I try to paint a lot more softly. I like to dull down the colors and really let that background sit in the background and be pushed further away. So the first thing that I'm doing here, you can see I've already laid out my drawing and I'm working into my wet into wet wash, and I wanted the light on this tree to be an important area of the painting, as well as the light on this house here. Typically, what I do within my first wash is I'm laying in the lightest areas first. And that way, as I paint around those areas, I can remember that these are the brightest parts of the painting, and the rest of the areas can be darker than these areas. Much of this tree is going to be painted around by the dark green of all the foliage around the tree. So I don't have to worry so much about these soft, nondescript edges. I'm really going to get the value that I need around the tree to ensure that that's bright enough. While this is still wet, I wanted to lay in some soft greens in the background. I really want that background to just kind of recede into the distance. So I've painted some Cerulean Blue and some Cobalt Blue in the sky. And as I get down to here, you can see I'm going in with this brush and introducing some Cobalt Turquoise and some raw sienna to the soft transition between sky and trees. So I'm working my way down. I'm dropping in the value on the roof of all of these buildings, knowing that the trees are really going to define a lot of the value around the roofs here. I will come back in and paint around these, so this fuzzing that's happening, that's okay. Nothing to worry about there. And I'm dropping some more wet into the background, continuing to allow that to be nice and soft. And the shadow side of this building, I'm connecting into the soft background as well. Some cooler colors, some warmer colors, always trying to mix that up and not use one color just for too much of the painting. And as I get down to the ground area, I'm connecting that into the wet wash, using more saturation here in the middle ground. So one of the ideas in organizing is that the background really sits in the background. So within this first wash, I'm using softer edges. I'm using not quite as vibrant green in the background as what I'm using here in the middle ground. And part of the reason is I want the background to sit further back, and warm colors bring things forward and draw attention from the viewer. I'm saving my warmest color of green right around here in the middle ground of the painting. All right, and that is what the first wash looks like. I've laid in the lightest values of my entire scene. I've left the face of this a really light color, and I added in a little bit of warmth and some gray for the light side of this tree. Now at this stage, I'm going to let everything dry, and then we'll come into the next phase of the painting. And now I need to think about painting the large connected middle value shape of this scene. And a lot of that shape is going to be the foliage and the green of this main tree and the trees in the background that are kind of enfolding and going over and will define the shapes of the houses and the other buildings back here. So I'm going to start with that large tree shape. I'm using a lot of Cobalt Turquoise and raw sienna for this bit of green here. And as I'm painting the main part of this tree, I'm finding areas of the shadow part of the tree, the more middle value of the tree that I can connect right into that shape. And I'm leaving the area of light on the tree, and I'm connecting the middle values from the branches into the foliage of the tree. Like I mentioned before, this tree is really going to define the houses. All this green back here around the other buildings is giving us some definition. And I'm going to zip through this because I want to talk about the background. When we look at this scene, this house here and this tree are in the middle ground of the painting. We want that middle ground of the painting have more attention than anywhere else in the scene. And so you'll notice right here that this house has more color than this house. There's more contrast than what's going on back here. I'm making strategic decisions to increase the amount of attention that the middle ground of the painting gets and minimizing the background and the foreground. In the middle of the painting, we want the most of everything, like I'd mentioned. We want the most of everything. We want the most contrast, the most saturation, the most interest to be right in the middle of the scene. So when I get to this point of the painting, I know that I want the middle values and the darks of this tree to tie in to the middle values that I've painted around it. After I zip ahead, we're really starting to see the light come alive in this painting. When we get the middle values and some of the darks and the texture into this tree, things are starting to lock into focus. And that's what I want to help you do, is to bring the focus in your painting by really emphasizing the middle ground of the painting. And now I needed to connect this shadow of the tree onto the ground. Things are looking pretty good, but I know that I can use some texture to bring this area closer to us. So let's talk about what we want the foreground of the painting to look like. We want the foreground to just accent and complement what is going on in the middle ground of the painting. If we have too much texture and attention here in this part of the painting and too much contrast, if I really get involved in every little blade of grass and everything here in this scene, the viewer's going to have a hard time getting into the scene. They're going to get distracted and stuck on the foreground. We want enough attention to help it feel close to us, but not to distract us from the rest of the painting. One way that we can have that foreground feel closer to us, but not steal the show, is by doing another wash to add some texture to the scene. And I do this a lot of times near the end of my painting when I know the foreground needs to come forward a little bit, but we don't want to overwork it. And so I'm taking a medium-sized brush here, and I'm doing another wash over the grass. And this does a couple things for me. It's going to add a little bit more color to the foreground of the painting, but also it's going to give me some texture. So by leaving a little bit of that first wash behind, I can create some texture. And notice I want more of it here in the foreground and less of it as I get into the scene. There's after I applied the texture, and there it is before the texture. Also in this wash, you saw me enhancing a little bit of details on the house, hinting at a little fence here, getting a little bit of contrast. Those fine-tuning details that are very important in your painting. And when you're applying those to your scene, you want to, first of all, not overdo it, because it's really easy when you get to the stage of your painting to look at your reference photo and try to get every little detail into your painting. Don't have that approach. Step back from your scene, take a look. What are the areas that can enhance my painting? In fact, a lot of times I'll start with the focal area first and get that how you want it to look, and then go to the background. If you start doing details in the background first and then come forward, the only thing you can do to add more emphasis is to keep adding more and more things, and that's when you start to overwork your painting. I felt like I needed to come in and add a little more detail on the tree and increase some of the value and the strength of the greens here to really pull that area closer to us. So I'm tying in some more darks into the tree to give it a little more emphasis and a little bit more darks on the branches. By making this tree in the middle ground closer to us and adding more value up here and more edge, more texture, these hard edges and marks compared to what's going on back here, this is softer and less finished, and it just is made to sit in the background. The middle ground, where we want more texture and detail, that helps that part to really come forward in the painting. And if we can pay attention to this way of organizing, of not overworking the foreground, giving enough attention in the foreground where it feels close to us, but it doesn't steal the show. And by really having the most focus in your painting in the middle ground with contrast and edge and texture and saturation, and then by minimizing that background and not letting the background steal the show, when we can organize in that way, our paintings become so much more focused and vibrant. Have you ever been really excited about a painting and you get all set up, you find that right reference that you're excited about, and then it's time to go and you feel lost? I have a free resource that I want to give to you today that can help with these problems. My 5 steps to plan a successful watercolor painting. I walk you through the crucial planning phase of your painting that will help you understand what you're going to paint first, second, and third. The planning is really so important, especially in watercolor. This medium is harder to correct. It's so immediate. So having that plan is very important. I send you a PDF that you can download. And the great thing about this is you can have it on your phone, you could print it out, and you can take a look at these crucial planning steps before you start each painting. All you have to do is follow this link here and download my 5-step guide to planning a successful watercolor painting.